I'm going to execute a series of steps to make sure that that comes to fruition. That requires way more than can be explained on the basis of cellular biology.
Let's get the atheist to jump in here.
Well, I would like to ask Dr. Carson then, at what point in the evolutionary divergence between the common ancestor of us and chimpanzees, or us and, say, rhesus monkeys, did this human faculty arise? And why do you need to postulate, given that presumably you believe in evolution, how do you reconcile the fact of evolution, because it is a fact, with the separation which you seem to be wanting to...
Well, thank you for asking that question, because, in fact, I don't believe in evolution. So Dr.
Collins and you can have a discussion about that.
We can, but, and I'll tell you the reason why. Evolution says that because there are these similarities, even though we can't specifically connect them, it proves that this is what happened. Well, let's say somebody came here from another planet after our planet has been destroyed by, terrorism and nuclear weapons and everything, and they find, some Volkswagens, and they find some Rolls Royces, and they look at them and they say, wow, these are really very similar, and they all have wheels and a transmission engine. Obviously, this Rolls Royce is much more sophisticated. It must have evolved from this Volkswagen. And if we look hard enough, we can find all the little things that will show us exactly how that evolution occurred. Well, you're welcome to believe that. I simply don't. Doesn't make you into a bad person because you believe that. And it doesn't make me into a good person because I don't believe it. But the point being, there are many different ways to look at these things. And Darwin himself, as you know, said that we would eventually have a mechanism, we would be sophisticated enough geologically to show completely the lineage from an amoeba to a man. He said it would probably take 50 to 100 years. Well, it's been 150 years, we still haven't found it. I suspect maybe one day you will. When you do find it, I will be all ears.
Dr. Dennet, you want to jump in there?
Yeah, I'm interested that both Dr. Carson and Dr. Collins say that there's something that they think couldn't evolve, or at least it leads Dr. Collins to say that's my reason for believing in God. He cites our moral sense, and Dr. Carson cites our capacity to plan. But in fact, we have a lot of excellent research on the evolution of the moral sense, on the evolution of cooperation, and on the evolution of cognitive capacities to plan. So that the discontinuities that both of them see, they are important discontinuities with the rest of the biosphere, for sure. But they're precisely the areas where we are developing good evolutionary accounts. And the big difference, I think, Dr. Carson's sort of parody of evolutionary research is that evolution, again and again, it doesn't just find another fossil. It makes predictions that are then borne out, stunning predictions that are borne out again and again across the world. We had actually a sort of few examples of that in Spencer Wells' talk. That's not just filling in the gaps. That's the real test of science, is being able to come up with novel predictions, and they happen every day by the hundreds.
Dr. Collins.
So I certainly respect the views being expressed, but let me say that this last couple of points seems to commit the error of applying in a very rigorous scientific way arguments about faith. I would call that scientism. What more important questions do we humans have to answer than, is there a God? Does he care about me? Why are we all here? What happens after we die? Is it not immediately apparent that science is poorly designed to answer those questions? And similarly, I would say science is poorly designed to assess the truth or falsity of faith. Surely one can look at the history of religions, and you can draw parallels between various belief systems, But I don't believe that will help you very much in deciding whether faith is true or false, because that series of intellectual approaches is not designed to tackle the issue that you most want to know about.
Let's jump out to our audience. We've got about 5 people lined up here, and we're going to try and get through all your questions, so keep them short, and if you can direct them to somebody in particular on the panel.
Okay, I think we're supposed to introduce ourselves. I'm Lindsay Worth. I did philosophy at Harvard, economics at Oxford, and now law at Yale. And I am particularly directing my question to Dr. Collins, but love to hear any answers. I hear people lots of times talking like you did about things that are outside the natural world, outside of space, outside of time, incredibly improbable, etc. And despite my overeducation and lots of smart friends trying to explain, I just don't understand what people like you are talking about. And I was wondering if you could help me understand and wrap my mind around what this is supposed to be.
Okay, well, I just enumerated some important questions that I think science can't answer, like why are we all here? How did the universe get started might be another one. Now, that is a question which science attempts to address. If you look at the way in which the physical constants that characterize the universe have their given values, it is astounding to note there are about 15 of these constants, from the gravitational constants to the strong and weak nuclear forces, for instance. Were they not precisely tuned to the exact values that they have, some of them to within 1 part in 10 to the 14th, then the universe could never have existed as anything other than gas, because there would not have been sufficient forces to allow coalescence of planets, stars, and ourselves. I find that pretty interesting, and I think that is outside of the realm of our current ability to explain scientifically, and you might therefore begin to speculate that that says something about theology. In fact, the noted astronomer Robert Jastrow, himself not a believer, talks about getting to this point and saying what an incredibly upsetting experience it was as you began to try to figure out that first 10 to the minus 43 seconds of what happened at the beginning of the universe. You get to the top of the mountain and you are greeted by a band of philosophers and theologians who have been sitting there for centuries. Well, I think that's part of the answer to your question. And since others have promoted their books, let me say, I have a book coming out in 6 weeks called The Language of God. There are a few galley proofs up there on the table. And I would be very interested in the comments of any of this group on the arguments that are in that particular manuscript.
Quickly, jump in.
Just quickly, that's another instance of the argument from improbability. The universe, the fundamental constants are incredibly finely tuned. So what? God, if he exists, also has to be incredibly finely tuned. Therefore, you've explained exactly nothing.
Our next question.
Hi, my name is Ryan Keller. I study at Cambridge. My question is for Dr. Dawkins and Dr. Dennet. Dr. Dawkins, you mentioned before the idea of religion and science overlapping, and I want to take this into the realm of ethics. Nietzsche suggested that with the death of God, in the past we had always posited our ethical lives based on some metaphysical entity that was extra, outside of the world. If our attempt is to excise God and kind of the metaphysical ideas that undergird Western or secularized Christian Western society, what kind of basis do you see as establishing a new ethics? It seems that ethics are an important part of the human experience. Do you see evidence or facts in the material world that we could somehow derive an ethical worldview from, and would that be social Darwinism, or what would you think that would be? And that's for Dr. Dennet as well.
Emphatically not social Darwinism. If there's anything that we have to learn ethically from Darwinism, it is do the exact opposite of what the Darwinian worldview would tend to suggest. However, we don't have to be that pessimistic